Black Lives Matter is militarizing. They plan to start armed cells and are declaring war on the police. Things are getting crazy. Hello everyone, this is Mr. Obvious, and today on the Daily Mail, I've got to show you something very, well, troubling to say the least. Exclusive. We prepare to stop these murders by any means necessary. Black Lives Matter leader declares war on police. And group is training our people to defend our communities in Black Panther style armed patrols. This will lead to nothing good. Now, I brought up this issue before, but Black Lives Matter is a hypocritical group. They claim that Black Lives Matter, but then they go out and they burn down Black-owned businesses, they riot and steal from Black-owned communities, and they hurt, well, for example, David Dorn, a Black retired police captain who was killed by looters. So it's always been a hypocritical sort of organization.
Black Lives Matter is a joke!
Yep.
You are the racist! The racist is you! It's because the white guy killed that you think they're racist. The racist, the Black Lives Matter! Go to Chicago! They don't have schools! Group of hypocrites! Go to Southeast DC, Northeast, tell them Black Lives Matter. If it matters, it should matter everywhere. You guys are hypocrites. Attention seekers. Attention seekers.
So what exactly are they doing? Well, Black Lives Matter is declaring war on police. Now, when someone says that they're willing to stop something by any means necessary, this is when you know that they're calling for violence. And when someone declares war on police, you know that this can only end in violence. I do not support this. I think that Black Lives Matter is, one, a hypocritical movement, and two, a violent movement, a dangerous movement. People don't understand that the police are there to protect and serve. Maybe not all of them do. Maybe the police have problems with corruption. Absolutely, I understand. Some cops are really scummy. But without police, there would be nothing but chaos. Now, before we read the story, if you're new to the channel, remember to subscribe and hit the bell button for notifications for more content. And if you're a regular viewer, consider sharing this video on social media, as it's the best way to spread those red pills. Now, here we are. A Black Lives Matter leader has declared war on police and plans to release a blueprint for change that involves Black Panther-style armed patrols, monitoring the behavior of officers on the streets. Daily Mail TV can reveal. So, as far as I know, the Black Panther group were a dangerous violent group. I believe they followed Malcolm X's teachings, and he also preached violence. It's very different to Martin Luther King, who called for peaceful protest and peaceful civil disobedience. And his method of rebellion was very successful. A lot like Gandhi, peaceful civil disobedience sends a powerful message, and it makes it clear who the good guys are and who the bad guys are. On the other hand, people like Malcolm X are not remembered because their methods, which call for violence, do not work, because they make you look bad. Kind of like we've seen with the riots, with the looting, the entire protest, the entire BLM movement looks bad because they've done violent things, they've looted, they've stolen, and they've hurt people. Nobody can support that. You're not the good guys. Hank Newsom, chairman of BLM's Greater New York chapter, says the Black rights group is mobilizing its base and aims to develop a highly trained military arm to challenge police brutality head-on. In an exclusive interview, Newsom says the BLM movement has marched for years to wake people up to the realities of police brutality and oppression, and he believes that since the tragic death of George Floyd, who died after having his neck pinned down under the knee of a white police officer, Derek Chauvin, during an arrest on Memorial Day in Minneapolis, people have finally awoken. Now, I've actually seen the autopsy report for George Floyd, and he died of a cardiovascular problem. His heart stopped beating. Now, here's the shocking thing, folks, and I don't know if it's worth a full video for this, but George Floyd was a drug user. Multiple drugs were found in his system. He had sickle cell anemia, I believe, sickle cells, and he had hypertension and heart problems. All of this is a recipe for disaster. He died because his heart stopped beating. One of the symptoms is shortness of breath, but the reality is, once it happens, it's over. So George Floyd was an extremely unhealthy individual. Oh, he was also tested positive for COVID-19. And he had a tumor. George Floyd was sick. and he was probably going to pass away one way or another. But regardless of how he died or why he died, the reality is Black Lives Matter is not justified in calling for these armed cells. Here they go on to say, it's our obligation. It is our duty to provide people with a pathway forward, he said. Here you can see a picture of Hawk Newsom. He's wearing the shirt saying, can't breathe, blah, blah, blah. I see a lot of people spouting this. People who are arrested for criminal activity, they tend to say a lot of things like, I didn't do it. I didn't do anything. Oh, you're hurting me, blah, blah, blah. Police hear that sort of thing every single day. George Floyd himself was not an innocent man. He was a felon. He had a criminal record. He was a known drug user. And one of his arrest reports said that he mugged a pregnant woman. I believe he hit her belly, her pregnant belly, like kind of jammed it with a gun and mugged her or something like that. Something like that happened. So you're not going to tell me that this guy was a saint. Like cops didn't arrest him for no reason. This is nonsense. See, the media never tells you about this because they know that if people knew the truth, they might think about the situation a little differently. So they go on to say, we want liberation. We want the power to determine our own destiny. We want freedom from an oppressive government. And we want the immediate end of the government-sanctioned murder by the police. And we prepare to stop these government-sanctioned murders by any means necessary. We are preparing and training our people to defend our communities. The bold and potentially inflammatory statement will likely infuriate those who have grown angry with days of BLM protests that have sparked violence and destruction across America. Yeah, so I think these people are all hypocrites. Like, I think this movement, this Black Lives Matter movement, are a bunch of hypocrites. They've rioted, they've looted, they've attacked people. People have literally died, okay? There was a man who tried to defend his shop with a sword. He was beaten to death. David Dorn, a retired police chief, he was shot by a looter. I think there's around, 10 people that have died now in these protests. And imagine all of the people who are going to get infected with COVID-19. George Floyd himself tested positive for COVID-19. The virus is going to spread like wildfire and more people are going to get sick and die. And we well know that black people are more at risk for COVID-19. There's been a lot more deaths associated with COVID-19 in the black community. So if Black Lives Matter, why don't Black Lives Matter to Black Lives Matter? So Newsom is currently in Los Angeles, a city devastated by rioting this past few days, where he held a think tank attended by members of the BLM Greater New York leadership and military advisors. In the conference room at the trendy compound in Burbank, Newsom said the group hammered out the details of the Black Ops Blueprint, which stands for Black Opportunities, a new direction he hopes will be the beginning of liberation of black people. Well, I think that a lot of these people are delusional because they live in America, in the United States, and they have equal rights. They have equal opportunity. In fact, a lot of minorities actually are privileged because of affirmative action and diversity measures, where even though you're not as accomplished, not as deserving, and you might not actually deserve the job or the position, there's much lower standards for minorities. So colleges will let you in even if you have lower scores, and people will hire you even if you are not as qualified as other people. Black Lives Matter has tens of thousands of activists protesting the death of George Floyd in dozens of cities around America and across the world. Now let me ask you something, folks. Does that make sense? Does it make sense that people who don't live in Minneapolis, where this occurred, to protest corrupt police? Because surely the police cannot be corrupt literally everywhere on earth. Why would people protest something that didn't even happen in their own city? And that's when you know that this entire movement is nonsense. It's just a cult. It's another one of these woke political cults, and all they want to do is get attention, get money, and obtain power. They're delusional. Why the heck are people rioting in Europe? This isn't about European police. Surely the whole world can't be unjust. That's why this is nonsense. That doesn't make sense at all. So he went on to say that police have waged war on black people for decades. You know, if you look at the statistics, the African American community has waged war on itself for decades, both statistically when you look at the crimes and culturally. I've seen it a lot. Like, I've seen a lot of toxicity in African American culture. It's very bad. You know, education is discouraged. Following the rules is discouraged to an extent. A lot of the music is pretty toxic. And there's a lot of problems in the community. You know, and I've had black friends and associates who've said the same thing. Who said they had to get out because of the toxicity of that environment. Because it was holding them down. He goes on to say, "We're talking about self-defense. We're talking about defending our communities," he explains. "You know what it's like to see a taser pointed at a 7-year-old. You know what it's like to see a 67-year-old black woman pepper sprayed and pushed to the ground." You know, maybe these things are wrong, but I've seen a lot of videos that I think are wrong. A lot of videos. And I've seen a lot of videos where it's not the police doing horrible things, but people from some of these communities doing horrible things to innocent people. Time and time again. I've seen so many. So if the world expects me not to condemn an entire group of people or an entire community because of the actions of some of those people, then I don't think it's fair to generalize all of the police as bad because of the actions of a few corrupt police. Okay? Because that would be hypocritical. And you also can't act like all police are evil because they're not. There's a lot of good police, and they try to enforce the law and keep people safe. Imagine a world with no police. It would be chaos. It would be fire in the street. It would be muggings. That's what they're fighting for. Chaos. So they go on to talk about the history of the Black Panther Party. Chapter chairman doesn't hide the fact that his group's blueprint replicates some of the ideologies of the BPP. "We pattern ourselves after the Black Panther, after the Nation of Islam. We need to arm and defend ourselves," he says. Wow. Okay. You know, I think that pretty much says it all. These people are radicalizing. They're militarizing. And, you know, I do agree to some extent. Technically, in the Constitution, people do have the right to form their own militias as necessary for the defense of the people. But I don't think that this is going to end well, right? I think that they're basically forming gangs. This is so analogous to gang formation. What they want is to drive the police out and basically patrol neighborhoods and enforce and self-police. Well, I think that's great in theory. Like, if you want to do that, go ahead. I think that's probably going to end badly. Because who's going to hold them accountable? Who's going to police the police, so to speak? You see that irony there? They're complaining about police officers not being checked, but who's going to keep them in check when they're patrolling their neighborhoods with weapons? So Newsom says the blueprint also aims to ensure that the black community has fair housing. Didn't Black Lives Matter burn down a affordable housing complex not so long ago? Economic empowerment. Aren't they also burning down black-owned businesses? And wants to nurture entrepreneurship. Yeah, if that's what they really cared about, I don't think they would be looting from their own communities and burning down black-owned businesses. Yeah, again, I think these people are stupid. Like, they lack the wisdom to understand what they're doing. They're not going to make the world a better place, and they're not going to make their communities a better place. They're starting gangs. They're talking about violence. They're escalating. But if they want to self-police, I'm all for it. Okay. In fact, I actually had a thought. I think that the police should show people what a world without police is like. Police in these cities where the protesters are protesting should call for a strike. They're going to strike from policing, and they should just let well enough alone. Leave these cities to their own devices. And you watch those cities get burnt to the ground. Burned to the ground. Because without police, there's nothing but chaos and destruction. Then, and only then, maybe will these people realize that the police were on their side all along. And necessary. But there you have it, folks. Black Lives Matter is, well, they're escalating. And this isn't going to end well. A quick look at some of the comments. Golf says, police life matters too. 482 says, denying a neighborhood access to the police isn't a service to the community. The Twilight Knight says, so much for healing things and making things better. Now we're going to leave off with this. Not everyone says. So, you will have no police at all. Will you control the city then? Anyone else get that feeling? Not all cops are bad. Most of them are good people. They help when called. And that's the point. If you defund the police, which a lot of people have been calling for, Who are you going to call for help when something bad happens? If you ask me, these movements are run by a bunch of morons and idiots who literally do not know what's good for themselves. But you know what? I actually support their self-policing idea. Go ahead. Let them self-police. Their communities will fall into decay. It's going to be a disaster. All of this needs to stop. But you know what, my friends? That's pretty much the story. I think it goes without saying that a lot of people are tired of this movement, of BLM, and of their escalation. But that's merely the obvious. Well, that's all for now, folks. What do you think about this story? What do you think about Black Lives Matter declaring war on the police? I think it can't end well. But let me know what you think down below in the comment section. As always, if you want to support the channel, you can join me on Patreon or Subscribestar. If you want to donate, there's DonorBox and other options. All that's down below in the description. And of course, if you like the video, consider sharing it on social media and sharing those red pills. Anyhow, thanks for watching. This has been Mr. Obvious, and I'll see you all next time.